to brainstorm the contract and to go through the contract and what the work packages are with a fine-tooth comb and what the interfaces are, and to get it all resolved. I've had an interesting experience this week, if I can give you an example. It's not a huge case.
Hello everybody, Gavin Coyle. I'm the Gaffer back again, and I'm bringing back a guest who we had on in the early stages of the show, and he was that much of a success, and we got such great feedback in terms of that particular podcast. We've invited him back again, but not just because he's a nice guy. He also has a lot of updated information for us in terms of the risks to construction companies in the current market in 2025. I know it's early days yet, and I know, probably you don't want to go down this route of having the harsh reality thrown in front of you in terms of how bad some of the industry is, in terms of the vulnerability of people and companies in terms of going into administration. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't discuss it, and if we don't try and problem solve it, it's going to get worse if it's not already there. And Len Bunton of Bunton Consulting is here all the way from Scotland to tell us what he's trying to do in his capacity in the best way he can to try and raise awareness in the industry of how bad the issue is, number one. And number two, because of the weakness, should I say, in the legislative framework, we have to find innovative ways to try and at least steady the ship, or at least avoid the risks within your construction business. And if you're not going to do anything else for the next 45 minutes, this would be a very good listen in terms of trying to protect your business. Len Bunton, the Rhino, welcome back.
Thank you, Gavin, and thank you very much for a second invitation. The check that you sent me after my first podcast, I haven't cashed it yet. It's on the wall in my office. It's the first time I've seen a check for £1 million. So I'm delighted that you're giving me the opportunity to put another one up on the wall.
Yeah, we tried Revolut. That much wouldn't go across over to you, Len. So, with tickets for Scotland and Ireland and the rugby might be on the way as well for next year. So
fantastic. Good.
Tell me, how have you been keeping? How are you health-wise, and how are you family-wise, and everything going good in Scotland?
Well, I keep saying to people who say to me, how are you? I say, well, I'm still casting a shadow, which is good, and I would like that to continue with the will of God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, keeping fine. I'm tremendously busy, and I want to just talk about some of the issues that I'm seeing. And I'm still trying to get out for my daily walk. I try to do 4 miles a day and take a bit of time out and try to get some exercise. So, yeah, good. And bizarrely enjoying what I'm doing, although when I tell some of your listeners what I'm doing, they might think I'm absolutely off my trolley, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, and we appreciate you doing it, because there's a lot of companies going under in the UK and Ireland, and I'm sure we have listeners across the world. I don't see it being any different in other regions from listening and from having other guests on the podcast. They're saying the same thing, that there's still people in a very vulnerable positions, in a lot of risk, taking on a lot of responsibility that maybe they shouldn't need to take on, or they just didn't understood the documents that they were signing or the contracts that they were negotiating. Now, with the best will in the world, it's all right having hindsight and 2020 vision, but let's start talking about what people can do before they start signing contracts or before they start entering into relationships. We would go from there first, I think.
Yeah. Well, let me set the scene. We currently have about between 35 and 40 regular clients. One steelwork company we work for, I've been doing that for over 20 years. I got a great relationship with the client and his team. I also deal a lot with other consultants in the industry because I'm on so many different committees, and I'm an advisor to a number of trade organisations. So I get an awful lot of information into me from a lot of people about what their experiences are of the industry. And I've been able to build up a pretty good picture as to what's going on. And whilst I want to make this podcast positive for your listeners, I think we have to start with a realistic analysis that the industry is in very, very poor shape, as you have just mentioned. Not in any order, the level of insolvencies, and even in the last 2 months, have been absolutely incredible. Leaving aside the ISG one, and the figures on that are horrific. In the last few weeks, we've seen the mechanical and electrical sector getting hit badly, with 4 or 5 major firms going down. And also in the last 2 days, just coincidentally, I've had a dialogue with 2 different people, one a consultant, one a contractor, who are telling me that every job is now turning into a nightmare for whatever reason, all sorts of things that are happening. And they're all saying that they have never experienced anything like this. I also, with the people I'm working for, I'm seeing a lot of mental health issues emerging. When you're dealing with a financial problem that the business has, one client said to me recently, when I drive home at 5 o'clock on a Friday night and go into the house and the kids want to do something tomorrow and I've got to do this, that, and the next thing, your brain doesn't switch off and you're spending the whole weekend wondering if the check you're going to get from somebody who's promised it several times on Monday morning will arrive. And a number of people I'm dealing with have said, Len, I've had enough. I'm going to wind the business down. I just can't cope with it anymore. And I think one of the things I do a lot is give a lot of my time to my clients, because you need to have somebody there that can try to get you out of trouble and give you support. And I don't mean to sound like I'm a Samaritan type person, although they do a fantastic job. I just think the industry needs people to support each other to help them through difficult times. So that's the bad news. What we have also seen in the last 2 to 3 years is more talk about collaboration. And again, I'm involved in a raft of different organizations where everybody is saying we need much more collaboration. The problem is, Gaffer, that nobody actually defines what collaboration is. They don't come out and say, here's what we need to do, and we're not doing it at the present moment. And on several other podcasts, I've said that the collaborators now need to start collaborating with each other, because that's not happening. Dozens and dozens of organizations who have got very good people on them, all doing a lot of things, but it's not all coming together. I noticed recently that the UK government have appointed a construction champion. And the first thing he's done is gone round a lot of organisations to talk to them. And I've written to him, I said, look, the first thing you should be doing is get on your chauffeur-driven car and get round construction sites and start talking to contractors in the supply chain and the people that are actually building the buildings, making some real change in the industry. Now, that very neatly brings me on to a subject that you and I have discussed many times. I'm currently chairman of the Conflict Avoidance Coalition. The objective of the coalition is to create a situation that where issues arrive in a construction project, the parties can lay these issues aside and try to find a resolution. Alternatively, they will end up in a costly and timing adjudication, which simply damages relationships. The coalition now has nearly 90 organisations involved in it. Across the whole industry, we've got Tier 1, Tier 2 contractors, clients, public and private sector clients, representatives from nuclear, health, education, you name it. I've gone out there and nabbed them and said, come on board this, we need your input. Now, the coalition meets every 4 weeks for an hour, and what we do is just share what's happening in the industry, and we're now beginning to see real progress in that the conflict avoidance clauses are getting embedded into contracts that are going to tender. It's a very simple process, Gavin. All the clause says, in the event an issue arises in this project, we will agree to utilise the conflict avoidance process without throwing away our entitlement to go to adjudication. It's working successfully. It's been successfully trialled, and I think this will have a significant impact on the industry. And I'm encouraging as many people as I can, and I hope people on this podcast will sign the Conflict Avoidance Pledge, the RICS Conflict Avoidance Pledge. Sign that up. Come on board. The RICS and the coalition will provide you with a lot of relevant material. And what I'm doing personally is going into organisations and talking to from site management right across the board of the whole business about how they can bring these early intervention techniques into play. I think that this is a game changer for the industry, but I think the fundamental problem, Gavin, as we spoke before the call, is the whole procurement process. The Conflict Avoidance Pledge is a means to stop issues escalating into a dispute. What we're not dealing with is why disputes are actually arise in contracts. I did some research about 5 years ago with about half a dozen other adjudicators, and we identified about 50 reasons why disputes arise in projects. And these 50 reasons are matters that adjudicators have got to deal with. And to circumvent that, I was also leading a group about 18 months ago that produced a document called the Best Practice Guide, the CICV Best Practice Guide. Hopefully we might be able to give your readers, listeners, the link to that. And what that guide does is it's got 13 or 14 different recommendations which will help contractors manage the commercial side of contracts much better. I'm talking about simple things like when you issue notices, who you send them to, what do you put in them, that sort of thing. It's fundamental. And again, I think if the industry buys into that, we will start to see the triggers that create disputes falling away. So the industry can do a heck of a lot on its own to sort these things out, and shouldn't be standing back hoping that the UK government or the Scottish government are going to come up with a solution, because they won't, because they can't. The industry has got to sort itself out. That's a snapshot of where we are and what I think needs to be done.
Okay. And what about the argument that it's all nice to have all these processes and controls in place, Len, but if it's not priced properly at the start, it's irrelevant with all these processes that you might put into place, because the job is unviable from all the stakeholders. So, I've seen cases where it could be 6 months or 8 months into the contract, and the main contractor then realizes, oh my God, we got this wrong. We got this seriously wrong. And we're now knee deep into it. So we're going to have to sort of, come up with innovative ways to try and get some of our own money back. Yeah. So what's been done in that regard?
To tell you something that I see more and more as becoming a problem is design responsibility. I act as a consultant to the finishes and interiors sector. They have 650 member organisations, and we're seeing more and more that design has been passed down the line.
Yeah.
And last week, I also review contracts for people, so I see this all the time. Last week, I saw 9 clauses in a contract about design that all meant entirely different things. So we went and met the main contractor and said, these 9 clauses, I'm going to tear them up. And what I want you to do is put up on that board what design responsibility my client has got. And he'll either accept it or reject it, or you'll discuss it. And we'll come out of that meeting with a clear vision as to where design responsibility is. And I think we're getting to the stage now that a number of contractors are now going to say, we're not accepting design responsibility. And there's also an issue about professional indemnity insurance as well. And because of the Building Safety Act, the periods for PI cover are getting extended to 15 years or something like that. So that I think is a huge problem for the industry. And I bet an awful lot of people listening to this will be nodding their heads and saying, well, we're finding that.
Yeah, definitely. We only had a guest on recently, and he was very much at pains to say it's that design stage where it really goes wrong. And if it's not solved, like there is a disconnect. Do you feel there's a disconnect between design and operational? Do you feel there's a disconnect between design and operational, Len?
Do I feel what?
There's a disconnect between the design team and the operational team.
I think there's been a disintegration of relationships, sadly. One big bugbear for the design team is the fact that professional fees have been shredded. The design packages are being passed on to contractors. There's more and more contractor design packages into contracts. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I see a lot of now is an inability at the start of the job, before the tender's accepted, to brainstorm the contract and to find go through the contract and what the work packages are with a fine-tooth comb, and what the interfaces are, and to get it all resolved. I've had an interesting experience this week, if I can give you an example. It's not a huge case, but somebody came to me who was getting a project carried out. Would I manage it for him? And I said, well, I don't want to be the contract administrator, but what I will do with you is we will look at the project, we will look at what it needs, we will look at what consultants you need, we will get QS on board, we'll go out to tender, and then once the tenders come back, we'll work our way through everything with the contractor and, just look at the job. It's a complex civil engineering job, and the job is starting in a fortnight's time, and we think we have bottomed out as many issues as we can at this stage, including things like neighbour notification, how do you get access into a site that's in a congested part of a city centre, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that type of approach, till you get to a point of everybody in the room says, right, we're good to go, and off we go. That's the sort of detail I think that is needed.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. There's also the argument that because of the lack of labour in the market, it's so hard to find good tradespeople, that there is a level of quality that is reduced in the market right now, today, which is having an impact on construction work being successfully completed, and then it's turning into a row on site because there's a mistrust that, the contractor can't deliver what they said they were going to deliver. Is the shortage of labour a problem in this mix?
Yeah. Well, you touched on quality there, and quite rightly. That's another issue. And there's an organisation being set up. I think I've got this right. I think it's called the Construction Quality Improvement Initiative in Scotland, and they are now focusing on quality. They are now looking at how to improve it. Do you know that this has been running for some time with tremendous effort by the people that are putting this together? Only 150 organisations have committed to this, and you know what? It is beyond belief that public and private sector clients don't say to contractors, you're going to have to demonstrate to me how you will build a decent job for me and it's not riddled with defects.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to people that you've worked with in the past. In your tender contractors' proposals, I want you to tell me how you'll manage quality down the supply chain, and we will be reviewing quality at every progress meeting so that when we get to the end of the job, we don't get an encyclopedia of snaggings to be done. I just think it is such a straightforward issue for the industry to resolve. And again, I had a dialogue a year ago with 2 Tier 1 contractors that were banging on about this. And I said, listen, at the end of the day, you're the people that build bad jobs. Nobody else does it. The client doesn't. The design team doesn't. You're standing there while somebody's sticking a sandwich wrapper down a cavity in a site. Go and get it sorted, for goodness sake.
Yeah, but it's not as if building properties, building buildings, building schools, building hospitals, it's not complex anymore. The techniques of construction, if anything, have become more efficient and have become more transparent in terms of the techniques to build these projects. Now, I'm not a construction expert, but, anyone will tell you that the buildings being built today are far more efficient in terms of being built. So if it is quality, it's quality of labour, probably more so than quality of technique.
Well, some of your listeners may be able to tell me why we're getting quality issues. I don't know what it's down to, whether it's lack of supervision or whatever. But just get it sorted. I want to mention this as well. Another organisation I was asked to speak to, a developer, he said to me, Mr. Bunton, I bought a site for a commercial development. I found a tenant before I bought the site. I had it designed to the client's requirements. We interviewed a top contractor. He promised the kingdom of heaven. We started the job. We're 3/4 of the way through it. It's 6 months late. There's about £250,000 worth of variations. And I've now got an extension of time claim and a claim for 6 months preliminaries. I have done nothing wrong. And this is what the construction industry has given me.
Yeah.
So my answer is, two fingers to the construction industry. I'm not going to be doing any more developments as long as I get this sort of response from the industry.
Yeah, that's wow.
So I'm hoping these things that we've just spoken about will, let's move away from the number of organisations that are producing reports about how we should do this, that, and the next thing, and let's focus on make a difference to part of it. I'm still convinced procurement is the problem. I'm still convinced that where you evaluate a tender on the basis of 60% price, 40% quality, you're asking for a disaster.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's wrong with the industry. The price is the price. That's what the contractor's going to build it for. And it's time that there was a realisation that that is what is causing a huge number of problems.
Would it not be the case, Len, that maybe contractors need to get together and form their own sort of mini federations or mini sort of committees or groups? Well, not committees, but their own sort of club, if you like, and say, we're not part of those other contractors. We're not signing up to the way they do things. We want to do it the best way, the best quality, the best safety, the best design, and we have the blueprints. Is it not a case then that the construction companies that want to do the right thing actually form their own federations or groups, because you're not going to float all boats together?
Yeah, I think there is a grouping of contractors, but one other thing, as I said from the outset, I work with a number of the trade organisations. I think they do a fantastic job. Ian McIlwee, who's the chief executive of the finishes and interiors sector, his organisation every Friday puts out technical information to his members. And there's all sorts of things happening because of the Building Safety Act. And, the amount of information that these contractors are having to digest is absolutely incredible. But so I think that aspect of it is good. I don't know whether the contractors get together and discuss things. Many of the contractors are represented on these government committees and that sort of thing.
If I'm a property developer, I'm probably better then to be looking at these master builder groups or, industry specific, like your interior fit out industry associations, and go to those industries and say, can you put me in touch with your members in order for me to get tenders in for these construction projects that I have? It's when you go out to the open market, it seems to be the Wild West, is it? Is that what you're saying?
It seems to me to be infinitely sensible that a contractor should be part of the development of the project design and should be brought on board at the earliest possible date, and the specialist contractors. You must think I spend most of my time talking to people, which I do, but I had another dialogue with somebody recently who said, we spent nearly 6 months working with somebody to get a job over the line, gave them a lot of technical expertise to the main contractor, worked very hard on it, didn't charge a penny. And we got a phone call one day saying, great news, Harry, we've been appointed in that job. Oh, that's brilliant. Would you come into our office on Monday? And he said, to sign the contract. He said, no, we want to talk to you about your price. And he said, you can get lost. You have my price. Now, what can you say when that happens? Again, I think there has to be more people in the industry, Gavin, saying, no, I'm not doing it. One of the things we do in these contract reviews is highlight high-risk clauses and explain to the client, if you take that risk on, the following could happen. And we go back to the main contractor with a series of things and say, look, we're not happy with that, and that, and we have a discussion with them. And in about 19 cases out of 20 recently, the main contractor has agreed to take these conditions out.
Yeah.
And if they're not prepared to do it, a number of contractors are now saying, well, you have to find somebody else, because I might as well just go and take my business and push it over a cliff into the sea and take this job on. So, the industry has got to stand up to this kind of practice and this type of conduct. And equally, I have a lot of sympathy for tier one contractors who are getting a lot of bad treatment from clients, particularly in the private sector. Some of the stories that I get told, it's endemic, this type of conduct.
Talk to me about, I don't want to get into a legal argument or battle here, but ISG and what your thoughts were on that as a case study with ISG. What's your thoughts on that as a case study? Like, given that it's so new and it only happened a couple of months ago, have you an opinion on that?
I've got a couple of things on that maybe better not to comment on that, but what I'll say generally is this: why would you keep working for somebody that wasn't paying you when there's a suspension provision in the contract? And I'm not just talking about ISG, I'm talking about other people. A contractor in Scotland went down recently, and somebody I know was owed a significant amount of money. I said, why did you keep working for him? Because we were told the cheque was in the post, we get it on Monday. What can you say? What can you say to these poor subcontractors who have been hit? And you've probably seen the numbers, they're absolutely staggering. You've got nothing but absolute sympathy for them. But one of the first things when we get called in, if we get called in, as we do frequently, to a company getting into trading difficulties, the first thing we do is look at what their debtor level and creditor levels are and start chasing money for them. Again, anecdotally, I was asked to go and see a business just after Christmas. And I said to the MD, how much money are you owed at today's date? He said, you'll need to ask my financial director. And I said, how much money do you owe subbies? He said, you'll need to ask my financial director. And I said to him, I find that absolutely incredible. So I went back in a month later to see him, and he slapped a piece of paper on the table. And he said, that's how much we're owed, and that's how much we owe before you bloody well ask me. Sorry, I didn't mean to use that word. But again, I see a lot of businesses that are, people don't have that information. And I think chasing cash is the most important thing that people that are on this call need to focus on.
Your P&L, your monthly P&L, where are you at in terms of, are you sitting down in the boardroom or even with your accountant or your CFO or whoever it is, and you're just doing a simple P&L? It mind boggles that it doesn't matter what size you're a business, even if you're an independent one-man band, that you're not sitting down once a month and producing a balance sheet and a profit and loss.
And I mentioned two other aspects of the best practice guide. One of the things that we're promoting is that contractors should have a payment schedule in the contract. The payment schedule is simply a reflection of the payment terms, but it shows you when the application for payment has been made. It shows you when the due date is, the final date is, and stick to these. And I quite often, when I've been called in to help somebody, I've said to them, you haven't put your application in at the right point in time. Therefore, you're not going to get paid this month. And the main contractor is quite right to tell you you're not going to get paid this month. It goes into the next month. Now, that is such a simple thing for anybody in this listening to this to get their quantity surveyors to do, and they make sure they bang their application in on that date. And then follow it up a couple of days later and talk to the client's QS. Don't wait till the end of the month when you get a payment notice in and you find out you're only getting half of what you had claimed. Again, where I see as an adjudicator a lot of things going off the rails, an awful lot of contractors don't substantiate their payment applications. You need to provide the main contractor or the client with as much information as you can. So you don't get somebody that says, first fix, you're claiming 66%. I think you've only done 30%. But how did you arrive at that? Well, I spoke to the site agent and he told me these are just fundamental things that are going wrong, which are causing payment and cash flow problems in the industry, in my experience. And if everybody tightened up on that, I'm sure it would make a heck of a difference to their business.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Len. We'll put the best practice guide. It's 2 documents, isn't it? Len?
No, it's one document. What we've done is, what I sent you was, we've developed some of the recommendations into a much more detailed practice note. And again, I can make these available to anybody that's interested. They go on they go on LinkedIn. You'll see them coming up, and it's really to assist people, as I say, Gavin, to manage their business much more effectively.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the document. It's not rocket science.
No, it's not rocket science.
And it's not like a Bible of, words, and then you don't know how to implement them, or you don't know how to execute what you're asking. Like, it's very basic stuff that you're asking people to actually do, and it kind of, in a way, you don't want to. I don't want to undermine people's intelligence, but like some of the stuff that you're talking about here, like visual evidence, defects and quality control, program management, project execution records, meeting and site documentation, essential contract documentation. You have, like, it's basic enough, really, Len. It's not revolutionary. It's plain common sense. In the Scottish courts, Gavin, a few weeks ago, one of the judges handed down a decision that said, in relation to extension of time and loss and expense claims, the submission of a notice is a condition precedent to your entitlement. And that was referred to the inner house of the Court of Session, and that was upheld. So a condition precedent is something you've got to do before you can get entitlement to something. So it's no use me going into a contractor's office tomorrow and he said, I think we're entitled to an extension of time. When did you finish the job? 6 months ago. Have you put any notices in? No, that's why we brought you in here. And I'll say, well, thanks for the cup of coffee. I'm going to save you a lot of money and I'm going home to play golf, because we're wasting each other's time. I mean, I don't know how many people will listen to this. There's a lot of contractors and subbies on this. Get their quantity surveyors to read this guide and start to implement these systems into your business. Yeah, but I think as well, what I was thinking about when I was reading your document, and thanks for sending that on to us, Len, was like you could very easily turn that into a simple training, 1 hour, 2 hour briefing with your team, and gather your guys on site or in the office in HQ and just bring the document with you and say, look, we're going to have a 2 hour training session on all these topics.
Absolutely. We'd be delighted to do that. We can do it now. It's so easy online.
Do it online, 100%. Yeah. And it's not a sales gig here. This is people's lives. People are losing their livelihood, and in some cases their own health over these issues. And without going into particular names of companies that have gone down in the UK and Ireland in the last 6 months, never mind 12 months, it's frightening. I don't have the figures of how many we're losing per week or per month. Don't know if you have that, but it's not good. Well,
there's again something that's posted on, it's either Twitter or LinkedIn, Construction Inquirer. Every week they're flagging up that Joe Bloggs and Sons is appointed an administrator. Just going back to training, Gavin, I would probably need to charge a few shillings for people, because I like to keep my wife in the manner to which she's become accustomed.
There's no free lunch in Scotland.
I can do a national one when I come over to watch the Scotland-Ireland game next year, and I'm sure you're going to put us up in a 5-star hotel.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Now, you sent me some interesting questions about things I've done. You asked me what was the most inspirational book or film. Well, don't go to the films very much, but I'm just reading a book at the moment, and you can see behind me.
Yeah, you like your books.
A fantastic library. When I've got any spare time, I'm into books. I see you're the same. Yeah, you obviously spent a lot of money on that.
No, the monkey with the eyes on.
I'm reading a book at the moment about Field Marshal General Ismay, who was Winston Churchill's right-hand man in the Second World War. It's absolutely fascinating. I love that.
What's the name of the book, Len?
It's so good I've forgotten the name. It's called Memoirs of Lord Ismay, Ismay.
Very good.
Who's the most inspirational business leader? Well, there's one man that has been absolutely outstanding in the last 5 years is Ian McKilvey, the finishes and interiors sector chief executive, and his team. He calls us Batman and Robin. I don't know who's who. I suspect I know who Batman is. But he's amazing. His knowledge of the industry, the work he puts in for his members, and he's into everything. And I just find him motivational to work with. Retire early or keep going? I don't think I need to answer that question. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. I'll give you one of them, Len. Knowing what you know now, what would you do different?
If I had to do it all again?
Well, knowing what you know now, what would you do different?
I think all my career, even before adjudication became popular, if I can define it that way, I would always try to find a way around problems for clients. I would do more of that and I would do more of the type of work I'm doing today of standing on platforms and seeing change. I wish I had done more of that.
Okay.
Your morning routine?
Yeah.
Don't do any meetings or calls after 9:30 in the morning. Next time I'm on calls is at 4:30, and I'll leave the rest of the day to deal with the mayhem that I'm involved in. Your pet hates negativity. I can't stand working with people that say, "Oh, we tried that last year and it didn't work." And I said, "Well, that's maybe because it was you that was trying it, so let me try it." I hate negativity, I really do. Something random about nobody you would guess. My wife read that this morning when she brought me in a cup of coffee. There's two things. Presumably nobody else is listening to this because I don't want this to go around the industry. My wife is an absolutely wonderful cook and she produces the most amazing meals for the family. The only problem is when everybody finishes and I go into the kitchen, it looks as though somebody's thrown a hand grenade into it. So over the 40 years of marriage, Gavin, I've become an expert at loading the dishwasher. I don't mind confessing that. I think it's very important in family life that you do your shift. Somebody asked me, how well do you do it? And I said, well, it depends how many glasses of Shiraz I've had. The other thing, and again, this is completely confidential, of course, I used to love hoovering the house. My wife bought all these different Dysons. They were fantastic. And then I come home about a month ago and Amazon arrived with a big box and unpacked it, and it was a circular hoover that works. It's electronic or something, and you program it to go around each room in the house, and when we go out she'll set it to go around the kitchen or the lounge or something. It's amazing. But I've been suffering from withdrawal symptoms, Gavin. I've had to go and see a Hoover psychiatrist recently. And he said to me, Mr. Bunton, I think you'll get over this in due course. But the thing is amazing. It's just a fantastic piece of kit. I'm trying to train it to go into the fridge and pour out a glass of Chardonnay. But I'm speaking to Mr. Dyson about that to see if he can help. But yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I need, Gavin, is we both had a lot of laughs when we talk. You do need a sense of humour in life. 100%. Otherwise you go down. And it's amazing when you're in a hot seat with a lot of angry people in a room, if you can lower the temperature with a few jokes.
Well said. Well said, Len. Yeah.
It's like, so it was the other day I started a meeting and it was very confrontational. And I said, I've got a wee story to tell you. I said, this penguin goes into a bar. And the barman says, can I help you? He said, yeah, I'm looking for my twin brother. And the barman said, what does he look like? So everybody cracked up and we actually had a bit of fun and getting a...
Yeah, but it's true. Like, it tends to get personal.
Yeah, they do get personal. And you see that as an adjudicator. I mean, I've had people threatening to punch somebody's head off. people swearing at each other, because, you know, they could lose their business if they get a not unsatisfactory result from an adjudicator. So you've got to be very sympathetic to the emotions that people are going through and understand that, and take the temperature down all the time.
Len, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Is there anything you want to wrap up with? I know that, you know...
No, just to say to the audience, look for the CICV Best Practice Guide, sign the Conflict Avoidance Pledge, and hopefully take on board some of the stuff that we've spoken about today. And if anybody needs any assistance, I'll be over in Ireland next March as Gavin's guest, a rugby match.
You roped me into a rugby match already, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm looking forward
Gavin,
to it.
as always, it's been great fun to do this. And I do think you do a fantastic job, same as Paul Hemmings. What you put out to the marketplace is absolutely invaluable. I listen to a lot of the stuff. It's brilliant to hear different views from business leaders. It's amazing what you can learn from other people.
Yeah, we never stop learning, and we're only here to facilitate the conversation, because we need people like you and leaders like yourself to come on the show and give back. You know, even if it's a small bit, even if someone takes one thing away from today's show, which is download these documents and you know, have a meeting with your guys and put a plan together to protect your business, you know, and take your foot off the gas, if you like, for just 1 hour or 2 hours and refocus yourself in terms of the risk profile of your business.
Well, I'm happy to do it. I think your idea of training. Just to finish on one thing, I had a conversation with a lawyer on Monday. He said to me, your client wants to go legal on our clients to get the money. We're only talking about 20,000 quid. And I said, what are you talking about? £20,000 to a two-man joinery company in Scotland is the lifeline of their business. And I gave him, I can't tell you, I gave him both barrels, Gavin. I really did. I just thought that was absolutely despicable. Anyway, that's it.
Len, thank you so much for being on I'm The Gaffer. I'm sure we'll be back again.
Okay. And you'll send me that hat you wore at the start, even with the one that was all frayed.
You're getting a hat and tickets to Scotland and Ireland next year.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Len. We'll see you again in the future. And we really appreciate you coming on. Take care, Len. Hello, Gaffers. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We love every one of the guests that we have. But in order to bring on more great guests, we'd love to build the channel with you. So hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and let's create a really great community where we bring in better and better guests for you to deliver great content and great pieces of information that you can take back into your business.